Black Beauty. A classic story by Anna Sewell. Adapted by Jill Munton. Chapter 1. Birtwick Park. My first home was a large field with a pond in the middle of it. There were tall trees, and there was a little stream. I lived in the field with my mother. When I was very young, I drank my mother's milk, but when I was older, I learnt how to eat grass. My mother went to work every day. She pulled a carriage for our master. I stayed in the field with the other young horses. We all galloped round the field together. It was fun, but some of the other horses liked to kick and bite. "Those horses have no manners. When they grow up, they will be cart horses," my mother told me. "When you grow up, you will be gentle and kind. You will never kick or bite. Your grandfather was a champion racehorse, and your grandmother was a good-tempered animal." My mother's name was Duchess. She was a wise old horse, and she loved our master. When she saw him at the gate, she always trotted up to him and let him stroke her. Sometimes he gave her a carrot. Sometimes he gave me some bread too. When I grew older, my woolly fur turned into a fine, shiny coat. I was a handsome horse, with one white foot and a white star on my forehead. When I was 4 years old, a man called Squire Gordon came to the field with our master. He looked at my legs, my mouth and my eyes. Then I had to walk, trot and gallop for him. "He's a fine horse. I would like to buy him," said Squire Gordon. "I will break him in for you first," said our master. I knew what that meant. He wanted to teach me how to pull a carriage and how to carry a rider on my back. I was used to wearing a halter, a simple sort of bridle, but I had never carried a rider before. First, my master gently put on a proper bridle. It had a metal bar, called a bit. This went in my mouth. The reins were attached to the bit. I hated the bit at first, but I slowly got used to it. Next, my master placed a saddle on my back. He talked softly to me as he pulled up the straps. One morning, my master got on my back and rode me round the field. He did this every day until I was used to it. Next, he took me to the blacksmith in the village. The blacksmith nailed heavy metal shoes to my feet. It did not hurt. The shoes felt strange at first, but I knew that I needed them to protect my feet when I walked on the roads. Then I learnt to wear a harness. This was a bridle with blinkers. The blinkers only let me look straight ahead. The harness also had a heavy collar and a strap which went under my tail. I soon got used to all these new things. Then I began to work with my mother. One day, a groom came to take me to my new home with Squire Gordon. "Good boy," said my master, and he patted me. "Be a good horse and always do your best." And so I left my first home. It was a very sad day. Squire Gordon lived at Birtwick Park. His groom took me through a large iron gate, and we trotted along the road that led to the house. When we came to the stables, the groom jumped off my back and took off my saddle. He led me into a loose box, a stable in which the horse is not tied up, and took off my bridle. He gave me some oats to eat and some water to drink. He patted me kindly and went to do some work. I looked out of the stable door. I saw that Squire Gordon had many horses and carriages. In the loose box next to mine, there was a fat grey pony. He looked at me with interest. "Good morning," I said to him. "What is your name?" "Merrylegs," he replied. "The children ride me, Miss Jessie and Miss Flora, and sometimes I pull Mrs. Gordon's small carriage. Are you going to live next door to me?" "I think so," I said. "Then I hope you have good manners. I don't like horses who bite," Merrylegs said. A tall brown mare glared at me.
"I'm Ginger,"
she said in a nasty voice.
"and you're in my box. They moved me to make room for you."
"I'm sorry," I said. "This is where the groom put me." Later, Ginger went out. Then Merrylegs told me about her. "Ginger bites people," he said. "Once she bit James, the stable boy, on the arm. Now the children are afraid to come to the stables. Perhaps they will come now you're here." "I don't understand why some horses bite people," I replied. "Ginger says that before she came here, her master was unkind to her. That's why she bites. But this is a lovely place. Squire Gordon never uses a whip, and James is very kind. So is John, the groom," Merrylegs said. The next morning, John brushed my coat and then put a saddle and bridle on me. He was a good rider, and I enjoyed galloping with him on my back. On our way home, we met Squire Gordon and his wife. John pulled on the reins, and I stopped next to them.
"How is our new horse, John?"
asked the squire.
"Did you have a good ride?"
"He's a fine horse, sir," said John. "He's fast, but he obeys the lightest touch on the reins. I think he was treated well before he came to us."
"Good," said the squire. "I will ride him tomorrow."
In the morning, the squire came to ride me. As we trotted along, I tried to do exactly what he wanted. When we came home, Mrs. Gordon was waiting at the door. "Do you like our new horse, dear?" she asked.
"I like him very much," he said. "What shall we call him?"
"He's beautiful," his wife replied. "And he has a shiny black coat. I like the name Black Beauty."
"That's a good name. Let's call him Black Beauty,"
said the squire. A few days later, Ginger and I pulled the squire's large carriage. I was worried about working with Ginger, but we trotted together very well. I was happy in my new home. I became good friends with little Merrylegs, but I missed my first home. There, I lived in a field. I loved to gallop around the field. Now I lived in a stable. When John rode me, I wanted to gallop all the time, but John was kind to me. He let me gallop a lot. On Sundays, when Squire Gordon and his wife stayed at home, we were put in a field next to the house. There we galloped about as much as we wanted. The grass was cool and soft, and the air smelled sweet. When we finished galloping, we stood together under a chestnut tree and talked about our lives. Chapter 2. Ginger. One day, Ginger and I were standing under the chestnut tree. I told her about my old master and how kind he was to me. Ginger snorted, and then she told me her story.
"My first years were very different," she said. "When I began to eat grass, 2 men came into the field and took me away from my mother. They had a bridle and a whip. One of them was my master Samson. He held my mane, and the other man pushed the bit into my mouth very roughly. I was shocked. It hurt so badly. Then Samson started to pull me along by the bridle. The other man whipped me. I hated Samson. His father was a kind man, but he was very old, so Samson did most of the work on the farm. One day he made me trot round the field until I was so tired that I nearly fell. The next day he put a bridle on me, and threw a saddle onto my back. Samson told people that he was an excellent rider. That day, I made a plan to teach him a lesson. He got on my back and pulled hard on the reins. I reared up on my back legs, and Samson started to whip me. I kicked and bucked and reared. I tried everything to throw this terrible man off my back. He held my mane and dug his sharp metal spurs into my sides. The spurs cut me badly. But at last I threw him off my back, Ginger went on. I galloped to the other end of the field and stood still. I was breathing hard and sweating. Samson got up and limped through the gate. I stood there for a long time. It was a hot day. Flies buzzed around me. I was hungry and very thirsty. Then, as the sun went down, Samson's father came into the field and walked up to me. He patted me and fed me some oats. "Poor Ginger," he said. Then he led me to the stables. He gently took off my saddle and bridle and filled my bucket with cold water. As he washed the blood from my sides, Samson came into my stable. The old man shook his head at him and said, "Look at poor Ginger. If you treat a horse badly, it will treat you badly too." I didn't see Samson again. A groom looked after me, and the old man came to see me every day. When my sides got better, the old man sold me to a smart man from London. He had one brown horse to pull his carriage, and he wanted another one. I hoped he was a kind man. But when he put on my harness, he made me wear a special rein called a bearing rein. I hope you never have to wear one, Beauty. It is so tight that it pulls your head up very high. The pain is terrible. I had to wear a very sharp bit, too, and it made my mouth bleed. I hated my work. Some days we were out with the carriage for hours. We had to stand and wait for our master when he went to a party or to the theatre. If we didn't stand still, the coachman whipped us. Our master didn't care about us at all. He just wanted his horses to look smart, so that all the fashionable people admired them. The other horse said that he soon got used to the bearing rein, but I never did. Then, one day, I ran away. I was caught and then sold again. The groom at the new place was as bad-tempered as Samson. He often hit me with his broom. In the end, I bit him, and I was sold again. That's when I came here to Birtwick Park. Everyone is kind here, but I will never trust a man. All men are my enemies. I felt very sorry for Ginger. But as the weeks passed, she grew happier. "Ginger needs kindness, the poor thing," said John the groom to Squire Gordon. "She'll soon be as good as Black Beauty." A few days later, some children came to play with Miss Flora and Miss Jessie. The children rode on Merrylegs the pony. When John brought him back in the evening, he said, "Behave yourself in future, Merrylegs, or you will be in trouble with the squire." I asked Merrylegs what happened. "The children roared me for a long time," Merrylegs explained. "One of them wanted me to go faster and faster, and he hit me with a stick. But I was tired, so I stopped suddenly and the child fell off." "Merrylegs, it wasn't Miss Flora or Miss Jessie, was it?" I cried. "Oh, no. They are always kind to me. It was one of the boys. He hit me with a stick. He wanted me to go faster. When John saw the stick, he was angry." "Good for you," said Ginger. "Did you kick the boy too?"
No, I never kick, replied Merrylegs. It's my job to look after those children. Squire Gordon trusts me. If I start to kick, they will sell me, and I like it here. Squire Gordon was never cruel to his horses. If he saw anyone being cruel to a horse, he became very angry and upset. One day, he was riding me home when we saw a pony pulling a small cart. When the pony came to Birtwick Park, he turned to go in the gates. The man pulled him back so roughly that the pony nearly fell. Then he began to whip the little horse. The man was called Sawyer, a builder who sometimes worked at Birtwick Park. Squire Gordon shouted at him to stop. "I didn't want him to turn," cried Sawyer. "I wanted him to go straight on. He deserves a good whipping."
"Your pony often brings you to Birtwick Park," said the squire. "He was very clever to remember the way. You must never be so cruel to a little pony." We walked back to the stables. Squire Gordon patted my neck as he handed the reins to James the stable boy. His face was very sad, and I knew he was thinking about Sawyer and his poor little pony. Chapter 3. The Storm. A few weeks later, John hitched me to the small carriage. Squire Gordon came out of the house, and John helped him up into the seat. I always enjoyed pulling the small carriage. It was a light carriage, and the high wheels sang as we drove along the road. It was a wet autumn day, and the wind blew dead leaves in front of us. It began to rain again. Soon we came to a little wooden bridge, and I could see that the river was almost level with it. "We've had a lot of rain, John," said Squire Gordon.
"Yes, sir," replied John. "Look at the fields." Some of the lower fields were completely under water. We crossed the bridge, but part of the road was under water too. It came up to my knees.
"I'll be as quick as I can, John. We must get back home before the rain gets worse,"
the squire said. The road went through a small wood, and at last we arrived at the town. We stopped outside an office, and Squire Gordon went in. He was in the office for a long time. As we waited, it started to rain heavily on my back, and the cold wind blew against me. When the squire came out, it was almost dark.
"Sorry I was a long time, John," he said. "Come on, Beauty. Let's go home."
John shook the reins lightly, and we set off. The weather was much worse now. When we came to the small wood, the trees were moving in the strong wind.
"What a bad storm, John,"
Squire Gordon said.
"Let's get out of this wood."
"Yes, sir. We don't want a tree to fall on top of us," John replied. As he spoke, there was a strange sound, and then we heard something tearing and breaking. A huge oak tree crashed to the ground in front of us. I stopped immediately. I was very frightened, but I didn't run away with the carriage. John jumped down from the driving seat and stroked my head. "The tree is blocking the road, sir. We will have to go back to the crossroads and go the other way," he shouted.
"But that will take hours,"
replied Squire Gordon. "It's the only thing we can do, sir. It's a long way, but Beauty can do it." I rubbed my nose against John's shoulder, and then he jumped back into the driving seat. We went back to the crossroads, and then down a long, winding lane. When at last we reached the little wooden bridge, we saw that there was water across its middle. John called out, "The river is very high, sir. There's water on the bridge, but that sometimes happens in heavy rain." He pulled the reins and spoke to me. "Go on, Beauty. Take us over the bridge." As soon as I stepped onto the bridge, I felt that something was wrong. I stopped straight away. John jumped down again and tried to lead me across the bridge. "Come on, Beauty," he said. But I refused to move. Then a man from a nearby cottage came running towards us. "Stop! Stop!" he cried. "The bridge isn't safe. It's broken in the middle. If you try to cross, you will all fall in the river." John put his arms round my neck. "You beauty," he whispered. "You saved our lives." Then he climbed back into his seat. As we trotted along the riverbank, the wind died down and the rain stopped. Squire Gordon and John were quiet for a long time. Then the squire said,
"Men are very clever, John. But sometimes an animal is cleverer. Black Beauty saved our lives tonight. We must respect our animals and be kind to them."
When we got back to Birtwick Park, Mrs. Gordon ran out of the house to meet us. "Are you all right, my dear?" she cried. "Did you have an accident? I was so worried about you. The weather was terrible, and you were so late."
"Thanks to Beauty, we did not have an accident," her husband replied. "Black Beauty saved our lives."
Then Squire Gordon and his wife went up to the house, and John led me to my stable. He rubbed me dry and gave me lots of oats. Then he spread the straw thickly on the ground so I could lie down and rest. One morning, in December, Squire Gordon came to the stables with a letter in his hand. John put down his hay fork and went to meet him.
"I want to talk to you about James, your stable boy. Is he a good worker?"
he asked John. "Oh, yes, sir," John replied.
"And does he do as you tell him?"
Squire Gordon asked. "Always," John said. "And the most important thing, if I may say so, sir, is that he loves the horses."
"Very good, John,"
said Squire Gordon. At that moment, James came into the stables.
"Put down your bucket, James, and come here,"
said the squire.
"I have got a letter from my wife's brother, Sir Clifford Williams. He is looking for a new groom, a young man who can run his stables and drive his carriage. His old groom is too ill to carry on, so I thought of you, James."
"Me, sir?" said James. His face turned bright pink in embarrassment.
"Yes, why not? How old are you, lad?"
"Almost 19, sir," James replied.
You're still quite young. What do you think, John?"
the squire asked. "He may be young, but he's the best stable boy I know," John replied. "He's as strong as a man, and he's very good with the horses. I'm sure Sir Clifford will be pleased with him."
You must decide, James," said Squire Gordon. "Go home and think about it. It's a chance for you to show what you can do."
For the next few weeks, James learnt how to drive the carriage. John sat next to him and told him what to do. We went into the town, and James learnt how to drive on busy roads. I helped him as much as possible. One day, as he put on my harness, James whispered to me, "It's just you and me today, Beauty. I don't need John any more." Chapter 4. The Fire. "James! Get Beauty and Ginger ready," John shouted. "And be quick about it. The Squire and Mrs. Gordon are going to visit some friends, and they live a long way away." James immediately stopped what he was doing and went to fetch our harnesses. When we were ready, Squire Gordon helped his wife into the carriage, and James jumped up into the driving seat. John handed James his whip. "Now remember, James, don't go too fast, and do as the master tells you." Then we set off. Ginger and I knew it was the first long journey for Coachman James, and we wanted to behave well for him. After a long time, we arrived at a small town. We stopped outside an inn in the market square. Squire Gordon and his wife went inside for their dinner. 2 stablemen came out and led us into the stables. James watched as they unhitched the carriage and rubbed down our coats. "You're a quick worker," he said to the older man. "I began to work with horses when I was 12 years old," the man replied. "It's good to see 2 animals who are so well looked after. Who is your master, young man?" "Squire Gordon of Birtwick Park," said James. I knew he was proud of us. "Squire Gordon is a good rider, and he's very kind." "You're lucky to work for such a man," the older stableman said. Later, the younger stableman brought another horse into the stables. He began to rub the horse down. Then another young man came in. He was smoking a pipe. The 2 young men chatted together. Then the stableman said, "Towler, will you do something for me? We're busy tonight, and I still have to feed all these horses. Will you go up to the hayloft and bring me a bundle of hay?" His friend puffed on his pipe and frowned. "I'm not paid to work here, you know," he said. But he started to climb the wooden ladder to the hayloft. When we were all clean and dry and eating our oats, James came to check that we were comfortable. Then he went out and the old stableman locked the stable door. The next thing I can remember was a strong burning smell. It was dark, but I knew that the stable was full of smoke. I heard Ginger cough and stamp her feet. Another horse neighed. Then I heard a crackling sound in the hayloft above my head and saw tall red flames. "Ginger," I whispered, "the stables are on fire. We can't get out. The doors are locked." At last we heard footsteps. Then someone unlocked the stable door. The young stableman ran in with a lamp and began to untie the horses. He tried to pull one horse out of the stable with a rope, but the horse was frightened and he refused to move. The stableman tried to untie another horse, and then another, and then he came to me. I was terrified. My legs were shaking. I stood quite still as the flames spread along the wooden walls of the stable. The crackling sound turned into a loud roar. I heard a man crying, "Fire! Send for the fire engine!" Then the old stableman came in. He was quiet and calm. This made the horses feel calmer too. One by one, he led 3 horses out of the stable, away from the fire. But Ginger and I were still inside. We thought that we were going to die in this terrible fire. But then I heard another voice. "Come on, Beauty. We'll soon be out in the fresh air." It was James. He took off his scarf and tied it round my eyes. I was not able to see the flames and the smoke, and so I felt calmer. He stroked me and talked quietly to me as he led me out. Outside in the stable yard, James pulled off the scarf and handed my rope to a man who was standing nearby. "Take this horse, and I'll go back for the other one," he shouted. I stood and waited for him to come back with Ginger. Some of the inn's windows were open now. People were looking out of them at the fire and shouting. Then I heard the squire's voice.
"James Howard! James Howard! Are you in there?"
There was no answer. I saw thick smoke coming out of the stable door. And then I saw James. He was leading Ginger out of the stable. She had the scarf over her eyes. She was shaking with fear. Squire Gordon put his arms around James's shoulders.
"You brave boy," he said. "You saved my 2 best horses. Are you hurt?"
James shook his head. He was not able to speak because of the smoke in his throat. Tears ran down his face as he stroked us. Soon we heard the sound of wheels and galloping horses. "It's the fire engine!" someone cried. The horses stopped, and the fireman jumped down.
"They'll put the fire out now," said the squire. "I hope all the horses are safe."
There was another inn on the other side of the market square. The squire led me across the square, and James led Ginger. They settled us into the stables with the other horses. In the morning, James fed us and filled our water buckets. There were lots of stablemen and grooms. Everyone was talking about the fire. "I don't understand how it started," said one man. "Does anybody know?" Another man said, "Someone told me they saw Dick Towler in the stable last night. He was smoking a pipe." "Smoking a pipe? Doesn't the young fool know that it's dangerous to smoke a pipe inside a stable?" said the first man. "Dick went up to the hayloft to get some hay. I think he left his pipe up there and it set fire to the hay," the second man said. Then the squire and Mrs. Gordon came to see us.
"Are you all right, Beauty?"
the squire asked, and he gently stroked my neck. Then he turned to James.
"Thank you, my boy," he said. "We're both very proud of you."
Chapter 5. Joe Green. A few weeks after the fire, I heard John and James talking while they were cleaning the harnesses. "I'm going to begin my new job at Clifford Hall soon," said James. "Who will the new stable boy be?" "A boy called Joe Green," replied John. "Little Joe Green? I know him, but he's much too young," cried James. "He's 14, said John. "But he's a quick learner, and he loves horses." The next day, Joe Green came to learn about the job from James. I liked him straight away. He was a cheerful boy, and he was very kind to us. On James's last day at Birtwick Park, he was very sad. "It's a good job at Clifford Hall," he said to John, "but I'm happy here with you and Beauty and the other horses. The master and mistress are good to me, and I will miss you all." "You'll soon make new friends," said John, "and I'm sure you'll do well at Clifford Hall. We will all be proud of you." Soon after James began his new job, I heard footsteps in the night. John ran into the stable with a lamp and put on my saddle and bridle. "Come on, Beauty," he said. "We must go to get Dr. White. The mistress is very ill." Squire Gordon was standing outside the stable door. In the light of the lamp, his face looked very white.
"Go as fast as you can, John," the squire said. "Give this note to Dr. White, and then you and Beauty can rest at the local inn. Come back tomorrow morning."
We hurried out of the park, through the village, and down the hill. Then we reached a long stretch of grass, and John made a noise with his teeth. He did this when he wanted me to go faster. "Do your best, Beauty," he whispered. I galloped faster and faster. We went through a village, and then the road went through a dark wood. I galloped up a big, steep hill and down again. At last we came to the town. "Well done, Beauty," said John. We stopped outside Dr. White's house, and John jumped off. I was breathless and my coat was wet with sweat. John knocked on the door and rang the bell too. The doctor's head appeared at an upstairs window. He was wearing a nightcap.
"What do you want?"
the doctor shouted.
"It's the middle of the night."
"I'm sorry, sir," John explained, "but my mistress, Mrs. Gordon, is very ill. My master wants you to go to her." 2 minutes later, the doctor opened the door.
"Can I take your horse?"
he asked John.
"My horse is very tired."
"Black Beauty is tired too," said John. "He galloped nearly all the way here. I wanted to take him to the inn for a rest. But he is a very good horse, and he will do whatever we ask him to." John helped the doctor to jump on my back. Then he looked at the doctor's whip. "You won't need that, sir," he said with a smile. "Beauty will go as fast as he can, but look after him, please." The doctor was a heavy man. He was not such a good rider as John, but I did my best, and at last we came to the gates of Birtwick Park. The doctor jumped off and handed my reins to Joe Green. Joe was waiting near the stables. The doctor hurried off to see the squire's wife. Joe led me into the stables. My legs were shaking, and I was still breathing hard. Sweat was running down my sides. Joe rubbed me down and gave me some hay and some water. "I won't put a rug on you, Beauty," he said. "It will make you too hot." Soon after Joe left the stable, I felt very cold and started to shiver. My legs and my chest hurt. I needed the rug to keep me warm. I lay down in the straw and tried to sleep. When I woke up, John was at my side. I couldn't stand up. John knew how bad I felt. He put 2 thick rugs on me and then gave me some warm food. "Poor Beauty," he whispered. "Joe Green tried his best, but he didn't know what to do. The silly boy has made you ill. He didn't give you a rug, and he only gave you cold water to drink." It was very painful to breathe, and I shivered all the time. John stayed with me, and Squire Gordon came to see me.
"You saved your mistress's life, Beauty," the squire said, "and now we must save your life."
Joe Green's father was a vet. The next day, he came to help John give me some medicine. "Please say something kind to Joe," he said. "He knows he did the wrong thing, and he is very unhappy. But he tried his best, John." "I'll talk kindly to him," said John. "But this horse is my favourite, and he's the master's favourite too. If Black Beauty dies, I will be very upset." The medicine made me fall asleep. I slept for a very long time. When I woke up, I felt much better. Joe learned quickly, and John began to trust him. One day, the squire told him to put on my saddle and take a note to his friend in another village. On our way back, we saw 2 horses. They were pulling a cart full of heavy bricks. The wheels of the cart were stuck in the mud, and the man with the cart was whipping the horses. Joe jumped off my back and ran up to the man. "Stop it! Stop it!" he cried. "The horses are trying their best, but the wheels are stuck. Let me help you to unload some of the bricks." "Mind your own business, you rude boy!" shouted the man. Then he raised the whip again. Joe was very angry. He jumped on my back, and we galloped to the brickmaker's house. "One of your men is whipping your horses," Joe told the brickmaker. "Please go and tell him to stop. He won't listen to me." Thank you, said the brickmaker. I hate anyone being cruel to my horses. Then he ran to get his hat. When we got home, Joe told John about the cruel man in the cart. You did the right thing, Joe, John told him. You're a good stable boy and you love your horses. That's the most important thing. Joe smiled and patted my neck.